Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
It wasn't a birthday or an anniversary, no holiday or special occasion. Just a regular Wednesday night dinner, her idea, not mine. She said she wanted us to sit down more, talk like we used to. I figured it was a good sign. We'd been drifting, and though I wasn't blind to the tension between us, I still thought we were just in a rough patch. Couples go through them, right? She made a pasta dish, lit a candle, nothing extravagant, just enough to create a kind of softness in the room. I complimented the food, asked about her day. She gave short answers, I was flicking to her phone more than once. The conversation limped along until it just stopped completely. Then she looked at me, not across the table, through me. You know, she began, swirling her wine in slow circles, you're not a real man. It didn't hit all at once. I thought maybe I'd misheard her, that she meant something else. But no. She leaned back, like she was giving herself room to stretch, and repeated it, clearer this time. I mean it. You're just not. I didn't ask for clarification. The way she said it, casually, like she was pointing out a scratch on her car or an undercooked meal, it told me everything. It wasn't heat of the moment rage. This was her truth, one she'd been holding on to for a while. I looked at her hands, jeweled, resting beside the glass she gripped like it was a prop in some place she'd memorized. She didn't flinch. She just stared back, waiting for a response that didn't come. I wasn't going to give her the scene she was bracing for. She went on. You don't challenge me. You let me walk all over you. Everything is always on your terms, safe, predictable, easy. It's boring. She laughed, just once. Not loud, not mocking, just sharp. I need someone who makes me feel like a woman. You make me feel like I'm just babysitting a soft version of one. It was so calculated, so precise. And the worst part? She wasn't yelling. It was cold, restrained, like she was slicing away at something she'd already buried long ago. I didn't say a word. I just kept eating, not out of spite. I was hungry, but also, I didn't want to give her the pleasure of watching me react. I could feel her growing uncomfortable with my silence, but she tried to mask it by taking another sip of wine, acting like this was just another part of a grown-up conversation. You're probably thinking I'm cruel, she added, softer now. But I've just been honest. Isn't that what everyone says they want in a relationship? Honesty? I nodded. It was all she was going to get from me. Truth is, the signs had been there. The way she'd started dressing differently when she went out. The shift in her tone when we spoke, as if she was speaking to an employee rather than a husband. I just didn't want to admit it. But hearing distill all her contempt into that one loaded sentence, it stripped away whatever illusions I had left. Still, I didn't let her see that. I cleared my plate, set my fork down with care, and met her eyes for the first time that night. I heard you, I said. Calm, measured. That's all. She looked confused, maybe even disappointed. She wanted me to react, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. I stood up, took my plate to the sink, and washed it. Every movement intentional, controlled. I dried my hands, walked past her, and headed upstairs. No shouting. Just a quiet, focused withdrawal. She didn't follow. Not then. I think she was still waiting for me to break. Still hoping for that final argument so she could feel justified in everything she'd just said. Lying in bed later that night, I stared at the ceiling while she showered in the next room, humming like nothing had happened. I was awake. Aware in a way I hadn't been in years. The kind of awareness that doesn't scream, it just clicks into place. She had handed me something priceless without even realizing it. A mirror, maybe. Or a key. A look into her truth, unfiltered and raw. By the time she climbed into bed, I had already made my decision. I wouldn't defend myself against a version of masculinity she'd created to excuse her own disinterest. I would let her talk. Let her reveal everything she needed to believe to make sense of the distance she'd carved between us. And when the time came, I would let her go. As someone she wouldn't be able to ignore. The next morning, I didn't mention a word about what she'd said at dinner. I got up before her, dressed without turning on the lights, and left the house with the same quiet deliberateness I'd used to clear my plate the night before. I didn't write a note. I just left, because whatever I needed to say now wouldn't be in words. I drove around for a while. Not aimlessly, just without a destination I needed to explain to anyone. The streets were still waking up, early traffic thick with people trying to beat the rush. For once, I didn't feel part of that crowd. I wasn't answering to a life that seemed to pull me in 10 directions. I was just silent. I stopped at a small gym on the edge of town. The place was old-school free weights, no TVs on every wall, just iron clanking and focused grunts. I used to lift. Years ago. Back before marriage, before mortgages and routines. It took a minute to get used to the smell again, metal, sweat, dust, but I stepped under the bar anyway. My muscles protested. My body ached. But I kept moving. Set after set. Quiet. Nobody knew me there. Nobody expected me to be anyone other than the man I chose to be that morning. That became my routine. Early mornings at the gym. Late nights reading instead of watching shows we used to half-watch together while barely speaking. I cooked for myself. Real meals. Clean, simple food. I started keeping a journal because I needed clarity. The kind that only comes when you put your thoughts into full sentences. No one knew. At home, I became less visible, but not absent. I was there, but detached. Just no longer performing. I stopped asking about her day. Stopped trying to make dinner plans. When she said she was going out, I didn't ask who with. Didn't ask when she'd be back. I gave her nothing to push against, no emotion to manipulate. She noticed. At first, she seemed relieved, less pressure, less expectation. But it didn't take long for her to grow uncomfortable with my silence. One night, she came home late. I was on the couch, reading a book, music low in the background. She stood in the doorway longer than necessary, waiting for me to ask her something. I didn't. She cleared her throat, dropped her purse on the table, then walked past me with a muttered, "Good night." I nodded without looking up. The next day, she tried again. Made breakfast pancakes, which she hadn't done in years. Thought we could eat together for once, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I thanked her, ate in silence, then cleaned my plate and went for a run. She didn't stop me. A few days later, I caught her peering into my journal when she thought I was out. She closed it quickly when I walked in, feigning casualness. "Just cleaning," she said, not meeting my eyes. I didn't call her out. I just picked it up, tucked it under my arm, and walked past her. I didn't need to hide anything. But she needed to know she no longer had unrestricted access to me. She began asking questions then. Small at first. "Are you okay? Is everything fine at work? Is there something going on I should know about?" Each time, I answered briefly. Yes. Fine. No. It drove her mad. And yet, she still went out. Still dressed like she was auditioning for someone else's attention. Still posted carefully curated selfies with captions about living her truth and finding joy. She would spend hours scrolling through likes, reading comments, then glance over to see me on the couch, quietly absorbed in a book or stretching after a long workout. No jealousy, just focus. Then came the first real sign of panic. One night, I found her in the kitchen, phone in hand, eyes red like she'd been crying. She looked up, startled, as if she hadn't expected me to see her like that. "Did you ever love me?" she asked out of nowhere. I paused, because I knew she wasn't ready for it. "I did," I said evenly. "Very much." Her lip trembled, just slightly. She looked down at her phone, then back up. "And now?" I didn't flinch. "No, I'm figuring out who I am. With or without you." She blinked, like the words stung. But she didn't argue. The next morning, she lingered at the door before leaving for work. "You look different lately," she said, her voice unsure. "Healthier." I nodded. "I feel clearer." She nodded back, but there was confusion in her eyes. Not guilt. Just a dawning awareness that whatever control she once held was slipping. She started staying in more after that. Sitting beside me on the couch, commenting on the book I was reading, offering unsolicited advice on meal prep. I answered when appropriate. Polite, but distant. She couldn't understand it. How the man she once dismissed was now something she couldn't define. Something had shifted. In me. And she knew it. She just didn't know what to do about it. It wasn't revenge. There was no spreadsheet, no tally of insults and dismissals that I planned to even out. But everything she had taken for granted, my attention, my money, my time, I began pulling it back. Not out of spite, but clarity. I'd spent years pouring into a relationship that left me drained and unnoticed. I wasn't going to do it anymore. It started with the little things. The automatic payments she never thought about, subscriptions, salon memberships, boutique clothing services, all quietly canceled. I rerouted our accounts, split the finances down the middle. She still had her income, but now she'd have to manage what she used to depend on me for. When she asked why her gym access card wasn't working, I shrugged. "Might be a billing issue," I said. Then came the car. The sleek imported model she loved wasn't hers. It was mine, leased in my name, insured under my policy. For years, I paid the installments without question. I told myself it made her happy, that she deserved nice things. But I couldn't keep justifying that not now. I turned in the keys and switched to a modest hybrid. She came home one evening and found a rental in the driveway, confusion written across her face. What happened to the Audi? I returned it. She blinked. What? Why? Didn't make sense anymore. You can use your car. My car has engine trouble. Then maybe it's time you get it fixed. I didn't say it with venom, just unmoved. She tried to play it off, but I could see the cracks forming. She called her sister the next day, loud enough for me to hear the whispered frustration through the door. I don't know what's gotten into him. He's acting like a stranger. Emotionally, I'd already left. Now I was just catching the rest of myself up to that fact. She still played her roles. Cooking a few more dinners, dressing a little softer around the house, brushing against me in the hallway with deliberate carelessness. She tried to smile more, asked about my day. I didn't ignore her, but I didn't reward her either. One Saturday morning, she suggested we go out to brunch. Like we used to, she said, smiling. Just us. I agreed, because I wanted to see how far she'd go to pretend things weren't unraveling. We sat on the patio of a cafe we once loved. She wore the dress I bought her 2 birthdays ago, the one she hadn't touched since the night she told me I wasn't a real man. I watched her across the table, talking about work, laughing too hard at her own stories, keeping her posture just right like it mattered again. When the check came, she reached into her purse like she was about to offer, but her hand hovered awkwardly. I looked at her. You can get this one. Her face twitched. Barely, but enough. I left my card at home, she said quickly. I nodded. Then I guess I'll cover it. This time, the implication landed. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to an old friend's house. Caleb and I had drifted apart during my marriage. Because I slowly erased parts of myself to accommodate her expectations. I didn't make time for people who didn't serve her agenda. But Caleb welcomed me like no time had passed. We talked for hours. About work. About health. About life. And somewhere in the middle of the conversation, I realized I wasn't just reclaiming my independence. I was remembering who I used to be. When I got home, she was waiting. You went out? I nodded. Caught up with a friend. You didn't say anything. I didn't think I needed permission. There was a silence between us, then tense, unfamiliar. She wasn't used to being excluded. Not from my schedule. Not from my thoughts. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. 2 nights later, I came home late. I had stayed after work, not out of obligation, but because I was engaged for the first time in a while. She was on the couch when I entered, still in her work clothes, staring at a muted television. You didn't text, she said. She studied my face, waiting for something. An apology. A promise to do better next time. But all I said was, dinner. I didn't make anything, she said flatly. That's okay. I'm not hungry. And I wasn't. Not for food. Not for the stale, transactional rhythm we'd fallen into. She tried to pick a fight then. A weak one. Something about communication. But I didn't take the bait. You're slipping away, she said, voice low. I nodded once and walked upstairs. The next day, she logged into our joint calendar, something she hadn't touched in months, and saw the blocks of time I had begun to reserve for myself. Gym, meditation, strategy sessions, weekend meetups. Every hour accounted for. None of it included her. She didn't ask questions. Not that day. But that evening, I found her in the kitchen, holding my journal. She didn't even try to hide it this time. I missed the way things were, she whispered, eyes darting across the pages. Then maybe you should have respected them when you had them. She looked up at me, face tight with disbelief. I was trying to get your attention, she said. Back then, when I said that at the table, I didn't mean to. You said exactly what you meant. She didn't deny it. She just folded the journal closed, handed it back, and said, You're different now. Yes, I said. I am. I'd changed to outgrow her. It was only a matter of time before her patience fractured. The polite smile stopped. The passive attempts to reclaim relevance faded. Eventually, silence gave way to tension thick enough to choke a room. She began asking direct questions, pushing harder each time she didn't get the reaction she wanted. Why are you treating me like this? She snapped one night, slamming the refrigerator shut. Like I'm some stranger in my own house? I looked at her, calm as ever. Because you are. She laughed, bitter and sharp. Oh, come on. I said something cruel, I admit it. I was drunk. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. You weren't drunk, I replied. You were just done pretending. And now you're upset because I stopped pretending, too. Her eyes flashed. So this is your idea of payback? Sulking around like a martyr. This isn't revenge, I said, my voice low. This is what it looks like when someone wakes up and realizes they've been living like a ghost in their own life. She didn't respond, just stared, wide-eyed, like the man standing in front of her was someone she'd never met. For a while, she avoided me after that. Passive again. But I knew something was coming. She wasn't the type to surrender. She'd circle back around eventually, needing to prove she still had control, even if only over the narrative. It happened during a birthday dinner for her cousin. A public event, packed with family, friends, and coworkers. I had debated whether to go at all, but I knew she wanted me there, wanted to parade me around like nothing had changed, like everything was fine. We walked in together, sat next to each other, exchanged pleasantries with the people around us. She laughed loudly, touched my arm often, performed. It was all so rehearsed I could almost hear the cue lines in her head. Everyone watching probably thought we were the image of reconciliation, but I saw through it, and so did a few others. Her cousin gave a toast midway through the meal, thanking everyone for being there. Then someone raised a glass and made a joke about keeping the real men close, a throwaway comment that wouldn't have meant anything to most. But she froze. I saw it in the way her smile faltered for a half-second, the way her fingers tensed around her glass. She excused herself to the bathroom not long after, and a few minutes later, her friend Amanda sat down beside me. Amanda and I weren't close. Barely more than acquaintances, honestly. But she looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity and not quite guilt. She's been spiraling, you know, Amanda said, eyes scanning the table like she wasn't supposed to be talking to me. I've told her to stop playing games. That it'd backfire eventually. She doesn't listen to anyone, she continued. Not until it's too late. Then she got up and left. I looked over at the bathroom door and waited. When she came back, her smile was tighter, more forced. Her laugh didn't reach as far. Whatever Amanda had seen in her, I saw now too, fear. We left early. She didn't talk much in the car, just stared out the window, fiddling with her ring. That night, I walked into the home office and pulled out my old laptop. I hadn't used it much since getting a new one, but I remembered something I hadn't checked in a while, an old email account we once shared early in the marriage. Mostly inactive, filled with old confirmations and forgotten newsletters. But I remembered the password. I didn't go looking for anything specific. I just followed a hunch. And there it was, an old chain of messages, 6 months back. Her name. A man I didn't recognize. Their correspondence buried beneath spam and silence. The subject lines weren't subtle. Miss Friday already. Same room next month? Delete this later. She hadn't deleted them. Maybe she thought I'd never think to check. I scrolled through them all. Hotel receipts. Coordinated business trips that didn't match her calendar. A selfie of the two of them in a mirrored elevator, his hand on her waist. Her smile in the photo looked real. I didn't throw anything, didn't confront her that night. I just closed the laptop, sat back, and let the weight of the realization settle in. She hadn't just insulted me. She discarded me, rewritten our history behind my back, and then tried to coax me into pretending it never happened. And now it all made sense, the panic in her eyes, the forced effort to reel me back in. The next morning, I printed the emails. Just a few. Enough to make the point. I laid them on the kitchen counter before leaving for work. When I got home, they were gone. She didn't mention them. She couldn't. We sat in silence during dinner. She didn't eat. I did. And the entire time, she didn't look at me, not once. The foundation she thought she stood on was crumbling, and I hadn't lifted a single finger to push it over. She didn't speak about the emails. Not even 2 days later when we crossed paths in the hallway and she hesitated like she might finally say something meaningful. But whatever words she rehearsed stayed buried behind clenched teeth and guarded glances. That silence, once her weapon, had become a wall she couldn't climb. She understood I wasn't going to rage. The version of me who might have done that, the man who used to crave her validation, bend to her moods, reach for her approval, no longer lived here. It was a Saturday when she finally broke the silence. I was in the garage, organizing tools I hadn't touched in years. They used to collect dust, forgotten in favor of weekend errands and furniture stores and fabric swatches she insisted we needed. Now, in my hands, they felt like something else entirely, proof of what I was capable of building, shaping. She stood at the threshold, arms crossed, face pale. "I saw what you left on the counter," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't planning to hurt you," she continued. "It wasn't serious." I set down a wrench and wiped my hands with a rag, finally facing her. "You planned the hotel. You made time for the messages. I didn't think you'd ever see them." "I know." A pause stretched between us. One of those moments where history holds its breath, waiting to see which version of us would walk forward. "You've changed," she said, eyes narrowing like she couldn't decide whether to resent it or admire it. "I've reclaimed who I was," I corrected. "You didn't notice him because you were too busy looking for someone weaker." Her face hardened. "You're twisting things." "No," I said calmly. "I'm remembering clearly. You made it easy." She stepped closer, voice trembling now. "I didn't know what I wanted back then. I was lost. But I see it now. I see you. This version of you. It's the man I thought you could be." I smiled, and it wasn't cruel. It was just honest. "That's the difference," I said. "You're seeing me now because I no longer care if you do." The words landed with weight. She took a breath like she might cry, but no tears came. Her pride was still too intact for that. Instead, she nodded slowly, backing away. "I miss you," she said. "I don't miss who I had to be for you." She left the doorway without another word. After that day, she changed in small, visible ways. She stopped trying to mimic interest in my life. Stopped setting the table for two. She began spending more time in the guest room. I didn't ask why. The line had been drawn. I met someone weeks later, just by chance at a networking event. A woman named Elise. Confident. Sharp. We talked for hours, not flirtatiously, but as equals. She asked questions my wife never had. She listened without judging. I left the event feeling lighter, like I'd stepped into a room where I was no longer a shadow of myself. I didn't pursue anything, but I didn't hide the interaction either. When my wife saw the event photo tagged online, me smiling beside Elise, relaxed in a way I hadn't looked in years, she didn't speak. But she stared at the screen too long to pretend it didn't bother her. One evening, she asked, "Are we really done?" I looked up from my book. "We were done the moment you saw me as less than." She closed her eyes and nodded. "You won't forgive me?" This isn't about forgiveness. This is about release. In the days that followed, I began clearing out my side of the closet. Just a quiet acknowledgement that this chapter had ended. I moved into a small place near the coast, a modest apartment with tall windows and clean light. I filled it with things that reflected me. The books I loved. The tools I used. The space to think without being talked over. She called once, just to say she missed the sound of my voice. I listened, offered her the silence she never valued when she had it, and hung up. Weeks passed. I didn't look back. Then, one morning, as I walked through the farmer's market, coffee in hand, the breeze brushing my jacket, I saw Elise again. This time, she smiled first. We talked longer, laughed louder. The conversation had rhythm. When she asked if I wanted to grab a bite, I didn't hesitate. I was simply ready to be seen, not managed. And as we sat at a small cafe, sharing stories, I realized the most unexpected part of it all. I felt whole. Because I'd stopped giving pieces of myself away just to be tolerated. Somewhere, maybe, my wife was still telling herself I'd come back. That my detachment was temporary. But the truth was simple. She released me. And in doing so, she made space for the man she could no longer manipulate, only remember. A man she once mocked. Now someone she couldn't ignore.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.